Hey, everybody, Scotty Milas, ScottMilasFranchiseCoach.com. Another episode of What's Your Know Your Why, and all things considering franchising. Hey, I got a great guest today, and I'm really excited about this because I met this gentleman, I don't know, I guess it was just by chance 3 years ago, 3 years ago. I mean, time flies when you're having fun. And I was in the market for a CRM. And really a CRM that focused in on the franchising industry. Could never understand that all these systems are out there for the franchisor, but there wasn't any system for the consultant, development person, franchisee, and of course, bettering the franchisor. So I'm pleased to announce and have on my show today, Dave Hansen, President of ClientTether. Dave, hello.
Hey, thanks for having me, Scotty. I appreciate that.
It's good to see you again. I know, to be transparent, you and I just spent a few days in Fort Lauderdale at our conference, and wow, what an experience, huh? A lot of people.
It's so much fun. So much fun. I feel like I'm still recovering a little bit because there was a lot going on. 7 a.m. to about 2 a.m. some nights. So I'm not as young as I once was.
Yeah. Well, look, let's take a couple of minutes here and kind of get the audience caught up on who Dave Hansen is, who ClientTether is, your connection to the franchise industry. I will tell the audience that you are one of those suppliers in the industry that really has your finger on the pulse of what's going on. Kind of the things that shouldn't be happening, the things that are happening, things that are working, things that are not working. And I just thought, as someone who is looking to open a business, considering a franchise maybe for the first time, or even diversifying a current portfolio, technology is becoming more and more relevant in the decision process. So tell us a little bit about you, ClientTether, a little bit of history, and we'll just kind of take the conversation from there. How's that work for you?
That sounds great. No one ever complains about talking about themselves. So we can start with that. We'll move on quickly, I promise. So I'm, and thanks, Scott. Those are kind words. I do certainly try to keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening, both for our company strategically, but also clients and friends in the space. I guess I'm one of those guys. Like I've been accused of being a know-it-all, but I do like to know what's going on in the space. So first, I've been started my first sales gig when I was 5, and selling things door to door. That's a funny story for another time, though, Scotty. Have I told you that story?
That's interesting. No, you haven't. We got to share a beer over that one. I thought starting making pizzas at 9 was exciting, but wow, door to door sales at 5. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that at a later time.
Another time.
That is funny. That is awesome.
The punchline is the killer part, but you would blush, and it's hilarious. Makes my mother cringe every time I tell the story. But I've been in sales really ever since, leading across like education tech, high tech sales, translation industry. Right before I was recruited to come over and be the president at ClientTether. But I've always tried to plug into the ecosystem. If you understand the ecosystem in the industry and who the key players are and how people find information, like you really tend to understand a lot. And so and let's talk about ClientTether, and then let's start talking about industry stuff, like what people really want to know, right? But I'm the president, help run ClientTether, which is a technology company that was founded by the guy that founded 5-Star Painting and was one of the co-founders of 5-Star Franchising and founder of Painter One. Like he's really entrenched in the service industry. And 8.5 years ago, when he exited before the Dwyer Group picked up 5-Star Painting, he started his own company, and he said, man, there's no tech to help me create scale. They'd kind of created their own tech stack over that he'd helped design. So he designed ClientTether to address a bunch of issues in the space. But people have a hard time getting in touch with leads and nurturing leads. So he built a system that automates all that. And then he built a system that can automate, quoting and proposal management, online rep, and post-sell nurturing and referral gathering, like all the stuff that you would want in a service business, or as it turns out, in a franchise consulting business, but it was built for franchisors and franchisees. So if you look at any other big box solution, the names everybody knows, the HubSpots, the Confucionsofts, the Salesforces, they're designed for a single enterprise, like a pharmaceutical sales organization or a high-tech sales organization with a very complex data model on the back end and very complicated user interface. And so we built a system that's the opposite, very easy to use, Our dev mantra for a long time was, if a dumb painter can't use it,
Yep.
then don't build it. So you use it, so it's simple,
Yep.
like not hard to use, but it's also got this engine behind it that can automate so much that it creates scale at a local franchisee level across a whole network, or for a consultant, or for a franchisor doing fran dev, or whatever the situation is. It was designed to create scale and simplify the complexities of running a
Right.
business, and also create visibility. That's the other aspect when you run a business, right? You got to know what's
Yeah.
happening.
No, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. One of the things that has always impressed me about ClientTether and your team, Kurt and everybody else, Kent, is the adjustment to change. People look at the franchising industry and say, well, it doesn't change. Well, you and I know that it's constantly changing,
Yeah.
and the power information is always changing. And as your company grows, you bring on more and more clients, and the harder it becomes to please everyone. Let's face it, there's no such thing as a perfect franchise, and there's no such thing as a perfect system. So
Yeah.
adapting to change has always been, one of the things that I've admired about your company, the patience, the listening. I think you and I had a conversation last week that not a lot, but a good chunk of your changes and improvements, enhancements, have come from people like myself, other consultants, other franchisors, franchisees. Talk about change in the technology side, what you've seen over the last, I don't know, couple of years, as long as you've been doing it. Where do you see the technology and franchising going? And, what's the ride going to be like for us?
Yeah. Well, thanks for the feedback, Scotty. I know change is hard. It's hard for an industry. It's hard for a business. It's hard for people to see what needs to be done. And frankly, I think there's a lot of ego that gets in the way. That's one thing that we tried to avoid is like we are, I bet you 50 to 60% of our platform innovations come from feedback from our clients. And like you're saying, maybe even more than that. So some sprints, I'll bet it's 70 to 80%, and then other sprints maybe half or 25, right? But it's a high
Right.
percentage of our overall dev. The reality is everything's changing, right? Everything's changing all the time. And if you take a stance that I'm gonna stay right here and not change, you're gonna get passed by at some point in your career, in your life, in your business model, because the marketplace is changing. The economy, good heavens, like we've seen such economic turmoil the last couple of years. Like if you're not paying attention, listening to the signs, listening to people who are on the ground, you get out of touch, and
Yep.
then you
No,
start
you're
building stuff
absolutely
that
right.
people don't want. So let's talk about a few specific changes, right? In technology and in the landscape. There was a period of time, I'd say it probably ended about 5 years ago, where everyone was saying, boy, I want an all-in-one platform. I want everything under one roof in franchising. Think there are big tools out there, like a Fran Connect, for example, or something that they try to do everything. What happens though is you do everything at a C- level, right? And eventually, or maybe you've got 1 A+ and then a bunch of C's, and people start to get annoyed because you have limitations in the system. They usually get uber expensive. Trying to make a change in a massive platform like that is pretty much impossible if you need a customization. So the industry started to pull away from that and say, okay, now I'm going to get, it's called micro architecture, right? But I'm going to find the right tool for the job, and I'm going to make sure that it's got good ways to get data in, like an API, and it's got a good way to get data out, like a webhook, right? So there are people now who are trying to find what's the best sales automation CRM. I'm going to plug that in.
Right.
What's the best franchise onboarding tool? I'm going to plug that in. I'm going to make sure they talk. Then what's the best? I don't know. You pick another tool, right? What's the best marketing tech stack? I'm going to plug that in, rather than say I'm going to buy HubSpot and then pray I can make it all kind of work together and
Right.
sort of kind of bend it, spend 80 grand and try to customize it so it might work in franchising. Nope. People aren't doing that anymore because they've gotten more savvy than that. And so as a tech supplier, now the pressure is actually on all of us to say, can my system play nice and talk to everybody? And so that's one of the things we specialize in, is like making sure everything talks. But the people that haven't invested in that, especially young companies, it's hard to have good APIs when you're young.
Right.
They struggle
Right.
a little bit in that ecosystem.
Is simplicity becoming a norm? I mean, when you look back at technology and evolution of technology, when we think back how complicated it is, but now with plug and plays, things that you're talking about, simplicity has really become the norm. Is that correct? I mean,
Well, I don't know if you could say
Simplicity to
more.
use. I mean, look,
Yeah.
I'm 62. I'm not shy about it, and
Yeah.
I still struggle with technology. So
Yeah.
is simplicity kind of that norm on the operational side, the franchisee coming into the system, all these buttons to press, or is it let's make it really simple and only have them touch a few buttons?
What's funny is that should be the norm. That should be the norm, but that's not what I see. We replace a lot and are exposed to a lot of very complicated, very messy systems. But this is why. To be fair, I don't want to. You're not going to hear me dog on the industry. Like, I love this industry. The people in it are golden. Like, you can't find better people. They're just and this is the driver. I've been trying to put my finger on this for years. Like, why is it that we have such bad technology strategy in the franchising industry in general? But it's because a gentleman who had a pest control business was very successful and then started to franchise it. And that gentleman is the CEO of the franchise system now, but he's not a CTO. His experience is running a single unit entity.
Right.
And so, and this is where, emerging brands, I love them because they are so hungry for information, like how to make it work better, because they realize after they dive into that pool, they're no longer running a pest control business. They're running an enterprise with not enough money to run an enterprise yet until they get, 30 to 50 franchises under them. They're trying to learn how to sell franchises, how to build technology strategies, how to be a marketer, like all this stuff they didn't have to really do before at a different level. And so, but that's, I think, why it's usually not. Honestly, people have very complicated technical stacks today, but it's because they have industry tools from their industry that aren't suited for franchising. CRM is one, but a lot of their operations tools they'll use, like, let's say like a Jobber or like a House Call Pro, or a good tool for a single entity business. But when you try to franchise that, the data blows up and now you've got no visibility. And so that's a challenge a lot of people have. Simplicity, however, Scott, should be the byword. It should be the strategy, because if a franchisee can't operate easily without calling the home office 4 or 5 times a week to figure out how to push a button, then you're going to have serious scale problems.
So let me just kind of help the audience out a little bit. So, and I don't want to assume, because we know what happens on assumption. Just for definition sense, I just want to make sure that the audience understands the franchisor. When we talk about a franchisor, they are the brand. They are the owner of the brand. They kind of call the shots. They build the systems. They build the operational side, the marketing side, and everything. The franchisee is the person who invests in the business, become a franchise owner. So I just want to make sure that people understand that. But we all know why franchisors have systems, because they need systems and technology to manage the franchisees. But on my level, and you do work with people that are in my industry, the consultant side, we're working with the potential franchisee or the franchisee that already owns businesses that's looking to diversify. Maybe they own multiple brands. Now they're looking to add another one. How should technology be viewed, or how should the franchisee, the potential franchisee of this new brand, look at technology as an asset or a tool to them to be successful, outside of just product and service? I mean, that's important. But with the evolution that we've been talking about technology, there is now a back end. So how does a franchisee or somebody new coming into business ownership, what's their best strategy to evaluate the tools that the franchisor is giving them to help them be That's not guarantee success, but help them be successful.
Yeah. You got to be careful with words like that in space, right? That's such a good question, Scott. And maybe I comment on the question first, and then we talk about the answer. But what I don't see a lot of times, well, let me actually talk about what I do see. Let's spin the positive. When I work with brands that have cohesive technologies that are simple, very few touch points, maybe like, let's say 2, maybe 3 total tools that a franchisee is going to have to operate in, their cohesive technology strategy changes their dialogue. And if I was looking for a franchise, and I working in this industry, Scott, I'm always tempted to buy a franchise. I'm like, oh, that'd be a really good one. Holy cow. Because what I see on the back end is that's an easy to operate business model. There's proven success rate. What I'm going to be is this: I'm going to be selling, and I'm going to be parsing out work. And it's good. Like, I can see simplicity in the way that the operations are going to run, and that a lot of the minutia has been managed by technology or services by the franchisor. Like if that's my story as a franchisor, then I'm going to attract the right kind of buyer. I'm going to be attracting savvy business people
Okay.
that are looking for semi-absentee franchise opportunities, and not everyone wants those, right? But if you want somebody who's going to buy 3 or 4, then generally you want a model that's going to be semi-absentee. It can't be without tech. And if you start to dive into that tech, now the franchisee, right? If I'm looking for a franchise, things that I want to know how many technology tools am I going to have to touch on a daily basis? And how much time do people spend on these technology tools? I want to see them, like, show me what they do. And obviously discovery days for that, right? But if I see, a day in the life, give me a 5-minute day in the life. What are things I'm going to do? And they show me the walkthrough, and it is do this, and now step out of that tool, and now step into this tool. Now, if I see they're going in and out of 3 to 4 different tools, I'm going to probably be more wary of that, because that's all manpower. Now it's sucking the life out of me. I'm gonna have to work an extra 10 hours a week just to make sure the tools are in sync, versus a cohesive tech strategy where the tech actually adds scale. Now I don't have to work 10 hours a week because of the tech. That's what I'd be looking for.
So on the scale side, that's a great point, the scale side. You know, a lot of people going into or looking at franchising for the first time slowly get educated that maybe you need multiple territories, multiple locations, you know, whether it's a territory, a retail location. And to educate our listeners, the technology for one unit needs to be able to be scalable for multiple units or multiple territories. Would you agree to that the idea of being able to have 3 locations, 5 locations, 10 locations, stop when you're done, that technology has to be able to help that franchisee and its management team, because if you're at that level, you have a management team now, to connect the dots and the communication between the locations, territories. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, a key indicator there are red flags to look for. If you're considering multiple territories and you hear, oh, so every territory will have its own login. If you hear that phrase, then you probably want to take a step back, because that means the technology wasn't designed for a multi-unit owner. You don't want that. Now, and you got to be careful, because sometimes, let's say if you're using our system, like, you might have a login for each specific location, but you as the franchisor or the multi-unit owner, you'd have one and you can see it all. Like, it's designed for that. So just to clarify that point, but you want to be careful. If the technology can't scale and give you better visibility as you expand your empire through this vertical of this franchise concept, then you got to be careful, because the technology will then start to become a stumbling block, and it removes scale rather than creates it. As you try to scale your the number of units that you own, so you can boost your revenue and your income.
As you hop on a jet and go visit people, franchisors, let's stick on the franchisor side, because or franchisees, let's stick with both franchisors and franchisees. As you hop on your jet and you do your traveling and you're meeting with clients and talking about enhancements and improvements, I'm a big believer that analytics data is very important in any type of business. I don't care, if you're selling lemonade, you need to know your analytics. Is there any information or data that you see that franchisors or franchisees should pay more close attention to than they are? Is there something out there that, is kind of that blind spot, is there anything that you see that is more important than anything else in the data side?
Yeah, absolutely, man. 2 things. They shock me when I talk to people, and I ask them, well, what is this metric? And they usually say, I have no idea. The franchisors and the franchisees. Sometimes the franchisees will have it depending upon their system, but I ask them about what is your conversion rate from stage to stage in your sales cycle? Where do you lose people? Where's your biggest attrition point in the sales flow? Almost nobody knows. And just as a sidebar, I used to help run a technology company that was doing translation, and we were Salesforce users, and I was trying to get that data out of the platform and worked with tech support And I said, hey, how do I get this? Like, oh, well, you have to hire a consultant. They have to build that report for you. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, you're supposed to be these
Right.
data monsters. And I can't even find out at what sales cycle I'm losing my people. And like, nope. And then I got a bill for it, or an estimate. And it was like almost a $12,000 custom build just to get to that data. Well, it's so valuable. I ended up coming to ClientTether, and we provide it. And that's
Right.
kind of the point. Like, you need to be able to see this. And part of the reason they can is because they're complex data structure on the back end. We streamline that. But the reality is, if you can't see your sales flow and your candidate flow, if you're a franchise consultant, or your customer flow from cradle to grave in one dashboard, and see where you're losing people, that's one area where you're losing money because you don't have visibility into your data. You should be
How
able
does
to
that
see.
tie into the franchisee side? Somebody who's looking at
Mhm.
franchises or considering owning a business. I mean, I know that some of what you're talking about on the retail side can tie into the POS system, but I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a connection to, or some of the data that you can't get on your POS system is more in line with what you can get on ClientTether. So where is the connection for that? If somebody is, going to discovery day at this point, they've narrowed down their search.
Mhm.
What should they be looking for on the franchisee side? I would imagine that a service-based business is different than a retail business, the data, what you're looking for. So on a service-based business, is it, if the franchisor is offering call centers, scheduling, things like that, follow-up, email campaigns? Maybe talk a little bit more about what they're looking for, or what they should be looking for on the franchisee side,
Yeah.
potential
So
franchisee side.
sure thing. So transitioning from what we are talking about to this, one thing they've got to look for is visible data. Like, they got to have data visibility, right? It's simple dashboarding, something that shows me, how am I doing today? How am I doing this week? How am I doing this month? Without them having to dig into reports and look into Excel. If the answer is Excel, then the tools aren't good enough yet, right? But that shifting gears though, like, what are some other functional things they should be looking for? Yeah, you're right. Retail's totally different. On retail, POS should be able to tell you, and e-commerce tools should be able to tell you, like, visitors versus buys, things like that. And POS is going to, I mean, all POS tells you is like who bought, not who walked through the door typically, right? So anyway, but it's different, right? That data is different. It's a different
Right.
operating. But on the service side, there are certain things that you absolutely must have in place, or things that you should be looking for. Like, if you have a franchisor that takes over a lot of the back office work and the minutia and the operating overhead. For example, like you brought this one up, but do they have the ability to streamline my lead follow-up and scheduling? So I spend my time at a higher partial, like a lower in the sales funnel, or higher level functions in the sales process. That's great, because that creates scale. You want to own 3 territories. Well, if you have to follow up on every lead in 3 territories, one, you better have really good tech that automates it. I know a guy who does that. But if they don't do that, creating real scale, like having a call center, or having an
Yes.
internal CSR team that manages those appointments and optimizes it in-house, honestly, is better than third party every time. But if you can't, if they don't have in-house, but they have a third party that does it, you need to know the metrics. What are their conversion rates? So if they say, yeah, we have a call center that we outsource to, ask them, what is your conversion? What's your schedule rate from new inbound leads to appointments? And if that number is anything less than like 30 to 40%, that's a bad fit. You want to take it over yourself. I've got clients that sit at 70% and they do it in-house using our automations. That's a good number. It's a really good number. It's about 2 to 3x most industry numbers. But if they got a call center, they're not scheduling at least 30 to 40% of all those leads, they got a problem. And you should probably not purchase that franchise, or find out why that rate is so low. You got to ask more questions at that point, because that should be a trigger.
So it's safe to say then, and again, just kind of pushing this out a little bit. And one of the things that I've learned since having my fingers on ClientTether is the ability to communicate with people, my database, on a regular basis without going in one by one with this client, that client, the automation. So is the automation, the campaign side, whether it's text messaging, email campaigns, reminders, to the franchisee's client base, and as somebody looking at a franchise, to help streamline those processes of communicating with potential clients, because they may not be a client now, but hopefully maybe down the road, remaining in contact with those people important? I mean, do you see the analytics to support that?
Oh, baby. Yeah. So yeah, let me tell you a funny story. I'll tell this with a case study. We had this is someone selling franchises, but the same thing is true of leads that you've already paid for. Most people look at old leads, or people that didn't convert as, they didn't want to buy it, they're a bad lead, right? Bad lead, bad lead. They'll even label them bad leads. Some people do that in our platform. But the reality is sometimes their conversion rate is pretty good. In the franchise sales space, we had a group that did a pilot, and they said, we got a whole bunch of old leads, but let's take 40 of them. Let's just drop them in a rehash campaign that included text and emails only, and no calls, because we can automate calls too, or even brownies in the mail. But like, it was just texts and emails. And let's just see what happens. This is what they said. So they turned it on, and within 60 days, they'd already sold one franchise. They had 2 people in FDD reviews. They had 1 person scheduled for discovery day. They had like, of the 40, they had like 7 people that were actively involved in the tail end of the sales pipeline. 60 days. When I looked at the data, I was like, holy cow, they reported it back to us. And I realized that their conversion rates on those old dead leads was actually 2.5 times higher than industry averages for franchise sales conversion, and they were dead. So you got it.
I've seen the value in that. I mean, that's the beauty of the, and again, not to make this all about ClientTether, because it is about the industry, but it is important that communication and having that ability through ClientTether. You know, one of the things that you and I had talked about, and we're kind of winding down here, so time flies when you're having fun, I guess, but and talking about something that's interesting. One of the things that you and I had touched on when the first night of the conference we were at last week, we had a conversation kind of jokingly, or that how young the industry is becoming, and that, but and again, as we get older, everybody else becomes younger, and that's a norm in industries. But one of the things that we found is that as much as the industry is becoming younger, it's becoming a lot more energetic. There's a lot of passion involved in this, in franchising. And I guess my question is this, and you've been around the block, just like I have a few times. Do you see the need for franchising as an industry to remain a positive attribute to the entrepreneur, the business owner, as an option, the success rates of owning a franchise? Do you see that our industry, and there are a lot of political things that you and I could get into about the industry, we'll save that for another time. But are you seeing the industry remain positive and an asset to the entrepreneur and someone who really wants to get into business ownership?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is 100%, absolutely, irrevocably yes. The reason is, Scott, is you and I have both done entrepreneurial things. Being an entrepreneur is the dream, right? American dream is to own your own business. If you ever want to develop true wealth, it's not going to be generally as a W-2 employee, right? Right. And so people that want to kind of write their own destiny, create generational wealth, or at least earn more and control their destiny more, they need to get into entrepreneurialism. They need to start a business. And here's the challenge, though, is you look at those rates, the success rates are abysmal when people are just starting their own business. Franchising creates the operating system, the infrastructure, the tools, everything, like approve a model, and it says write us a check to essentially buy the rights to use all this, but we've already got the package ready for you, and the success rates are astounding. And so you can take someone who doesn't have any let's say marketing intelligence whatsoever. Let's say it's an accountant, very savvy on the finance side, decent with human relationships, but no idea how to market. He or she would fail starting a business, and yet they buy a franchise and they can be incredibly successful because the franchise system, they kind of help us take care of that need that's a deficiency in a normal person that wouldn't be a general entrepreneur that'd be great at everything, right? That's right. A unicorn. So
Yeah. No,
I'd
that's
say,
interesting.
yeah.
That's a great way to look at it. For me, and I'm sure you've heard this from other consultants that, some of the pushbacks on why somebody shouldn't do something or they don't want to do a franchise, other than fear and anxiety and finances.
Yeah.
A lot of people say to me, and I've had this conversation with other consultants, is, well, they don't want to pay royalties. And, so sometimes it's really helpful to educate people on what royalties are. I mean, royalties are how the franchisor earns their money. I mean, that's
Uh-huh.
their income source. They don't get it
Right.
on marketing dollars. They very rarely get it on product,
Hmm.
unless they're a product distribution license type agreement. But I've always tried to explain to somebody, yes, you may go out and start your own home services type business as an independent, or even open your own restaurant. And
Hmm.
physically, you're not paying royalties. I get it. But on the back end, you really are paying royalties, because you have
Yeah.
to take some of your money, and it's probably going to be a lot more than you're paying in royalties, to develop your back end and your system and your technology.
Oh
And
yeah.
some people really wake up to that and say, yeah, I mean, you're not writing yourself a check every month for royalties, but
Mhm.
you're taking money out for this, you're taking money out to build that. That's a royalty to the company, right? Matter of
Oh
fact,
yeah.
it's an expense.
Uh-huh.
So, but just to touch lastly on the industry and keep going on the industry here, um, what what positive things have you seen out of the industry? And if somebody's coming in, starting to look at franchising for the first time, exploring business owner, is there anything that they should really be concerned about? Any red flags that should be on the top of the list as they start their validation process?
Mhm.
Anything that you're seeing or hearing that somebody should be aware of?
Yeah, well, let's start with the positive. I'll just say this: like, I've worked in a lot of industries, so have you, Scotty. And the one thing that I find is that this industry is just flush with good people who give a darn, down to earth people. These are the people that started the carpet cleaning business 20 years ago. Now they've got 200 units, right?
Right.
Uh, and many of them, they don't change that much. They become wealthier, right? But then they have to go through such a grind to get to that point as a franchisor. They're just good down to earth people. The industry itself does things that are incredible. Like, I went to an event, we raised like, 12 grand for the Ronald McDonald House and assembled like 600 kits
Yep.
for kids. Like, the industry has a conscience, and the industry is also actively involved in trying to protect this business model in America. So as an industry, I mean, there's so many good things about it. Some of my greatest friends I've developed in this industry, and I haven't been in it too long, like 4 years. So I just think anyone who's looking at franchising, you should just be aware this is a great place. It's a great ecosystem, and people are open to helping anyone succeed. You can be sitting across the table with a competitor, and they'll sit down with you and be like, "Hey,
Yep.
let me tell you about my experience." Like, it's a big blue sky mentality in this industry that I've never seen anywhere else, which I love.
Yeah, it's an
So that,
open it's an open book. I mean, everybody respects each other. I mean, I think the funny thing is, Joe Smo has been at X brand for 6 years, and the next thing you know, you meet him at a conference and he's with a competitor, and the competitors are talking. It's like, I mean, I've never seen it in any other industry. I mean,
no,
you hired my salesperson. I'm gonna level you out. I mean, I'm coming after you. And in the franchise industry, you don't have that. And
no,
it's
not
even
at
with
all.
brand people that own multiple brands. It's the same thing. Oh yeah, look, you own a McDonald's. Now you want to own a chicken place. Okay, great. Let's make sure it's not competing and da 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 da. Yeah, but
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Franchising. There's a lot of giving back to the community, and
yeah, a lot.
it's a Dave. I can't believe our time is up here. I think you and I could just sit around and crack open a bottle of Jameson and probably just carry on this conversation until dinner time. But in all fairness to everybody else, anything that we should have mentioned that we haven't mentioned, that potential business owner, that entrepreneur, that multi-unit franchisee looking to diversify. Uh, Anything you want to add about this, our conversation?
Sure.
Any
Yeah.
thoughts?
A wrap up thought. Your second question was, what should somebody be looking for? Be red flag, not necessarily red flags, but strategically, what should you be paying attention to? Labor is a big one that I would say. Let's end on this note from me. If you're looking at a franchise concept right now, the labor market's tough. Like, as inflation increases, unemployment will swing back. People will be seeking for jobs again. Handouts have declined. Like, there's all this stuff at play right now, which has made the labor market really crappy for business owners. So as much as possible right now, I just say, pay attention to how labor intensive the business is. Are you hiring a lot of staff? And if so, are they low-level staff, mid-level, high-level, mid and high-level? Like old people older than like 35 are a lot easier to hire right now than people that are under 35.
Exactly.
So
Great point.
yeah. So if you're dependent upon labor to make the business thrive, then reevaluate that or make sure you've got a great strategy. It's not a deterrent, right? But you just have to go into it eyes wide open and say, okay, I know, I just finished coaching my second year of high school baseball. Like I've got a great connection to a whole bunch of kids that are 18 to 20 now. It wouldn't be as hard for me as somebody who's like, I don't know a soul. Like my kids are 0. Like I've got a baby. I don't know anyone in that age group, right? Like you got to make sure that you're plugging into that ecosystem so you've got access to labor if you need entry-level labor. Otherwise, you're gonna have some trouble.
Yeah, good. Dave, outside of connecting with you on LinkedIn, what is the best way for somebody who wanted to learn more about what your organization does on the technology side, the CRM side, information side? I mean, what's the best way for someone to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I mean, you can reach out on LinkedIn. I'm on there quite a bit. You can also just email me, dave@clienttether.com. I'm an open book. Happy, even if you don't want to buy something from me, like I'll connect with you. I'll answer questions. I'll connect you to people who are experts. That's something I'm really quite good at. If you come to me with a problem, I'll be like, hey, it's not me, but let me tell you, this guy right here and that gal right there, they'll answer it for you. So I'm happy to kind of be air traffic controller if you need something as well.
Great. Well, again, everybody, this is Scotty Milas, Scott Milas, franchisecoach.com. Another great episode on technology and franchising. What you should be looking for in a franchise on the technology side with my good friend, Dave Hansen. Again, another episode of What's Your Know Your Why, and all things considered franchising. Obviously, you can reach me at scottmilasfranchisecoach.com or go to my website, scottmilasfranchisecoach.com, and of course on LinkedIn, Scott Milas. Dave, again, great conversation. Wish we had more time. I'm sure we'll have you back again. There's a lot to talk about in the industry, but let's make it a great day. And again, Dave Hansen, ClientTether. Reach out to him on LinkedIn or, the information that you see or hear, and the best way to get a hold of him. Thanks again. This is Scotty Milas signing out.